Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to episode 75 of the Snarp Fangle Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Metzger, and this week we are bestowed by the presence of someone who's always enjoying that easy living and heavy praying lifestyle. Ladies and gentlemen, David Reed. David, how are you doing this week?
Doing all right.
Doing all right. Enjoying a very cool day
Indeed.
in Northern California. We like to do things a little bit different in here in Northern California. Just a little bit differently. Enjoying that 80-degree weather, which is incredibly uncanny for July weather. Holy cow. And our guest this week is a guy. Yes, he's a guy who decided to pastor a church which definitely had some assembly required. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Kringle.
Hello, hello.
How you doing?
Doing all right. So,
Yeah.
got back from vacation, so recovering, how it is with vacations.
Yeah, you got to recover from vacations.
But doing good. Like I said, the nice, cool weather. Very productive.
You brought
this
it
morning,
down
so.
with you.
I know.
You went to
nice,
Washington and brought some down south for us.
Exactly. Yeah, there was a heat wave while we were there, and so bringing their cool weather back down with us, I'm glad.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's very strange. I don't understand. I feel like we've always had at least one day in July every year that's had at least like 85. But that'd be the lowest it would ever go.
Yeah, no, it was cool this morning.
It was like 60-something degrees. It was nice. So anyway, back to the 90s for the rest of the week, I believe, and then other details that nobody's going to care about listening to this podcast. So let's continue on. For comments, concerns, and if you're wondering how to abide in the Snarp Fangle lifestyle, send them on over to snarpfanglepod@gmail.com, or you can just text Jake. All right, gentlemen. Well, here we are once again with the Reed, the Kringle, and the Metzger. I don't know what Kringle means in German, but I'm going to guess it means baker.
Ish, yeah, ring.
Metzger
ring,
means
baker, ring.
German.
We're like a baker guild.
And Reed, I don't know, David. Maybe it's from some Asian descent.
Yeah, you know me. Capay's resident Asian man, David Reed.
With the most glorious beard. All right, anyway, let's get right into it. This is going to be a little bit different for the more recent episodes of Snarp Fangle. We're diving a little bit back into some spirituality here. So get ready, guys, and get ready to have a little bit of church and some fun and some humor along the way. So here we go. So what's been kind of mulling around in my brain recently, gentlemen, is kind of several ideas at once. But we're going to focus on seasons.
Okay.
But I've also kind of like been pondering a lot of sober-mindedness, methods of sober-mindedness about the same time, Nick, that you started the last couple weeks of your sermon, I would say. And it was funny. I was just thinking about like the sober-mindedness stuff, and then your sermon happened. I was like, oh, shoot, yeah. And then I had to give a word last week, and it turned out seasons was the most appropriate way to go.
Fair.
And it was kind of weird. Like, God's been teaching me something where he gives me puzzle pieces and he prepares me in different ways, like in terms of, oh, I get this from here and that from that and this verse from here, but I have no idea what order it goes in until like the 11th hour.
Fair.
And so like I got to Bible study Friday night. I sat down, somebody speaking, they're doing great and they are nailing it and the spirit is moving. And I'm like, oh, what? And then boom, the download just happens and everything just got written down and it was really good. But so I'm going to kind of go over a little bit of that and how I started it. And I kind of put it in here in a more expanded format. And I'm really excited to see where the conversation goes in terms of seasons. So let's get into it. All right. So I'm going to start with James 1. And we're going to start in chapter 1, verse 2. And we're going to go through 18. So here we go. If you want to follow along, audience, James chapter 1, verse 2. And this is, I think, New Living Translation is what I got here. It says here, verse 2, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." Verse 5, "If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking, But when you ask him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. Verse 7. Such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Their loyalty is divided between God and the world, and they are unstable in everything they do. Continuing on. Believers who are poor have something to boast about, for God has honored them. And those who are rich should boast that God has humbled them. They will fade away like a little flower in the field. Verse 11, the hot sun rises and the grass withers. The little flower droops and falls, and its beauty fades away. In the same way, the rich will fade away with all their achievements. Verse 12, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised those who love him. And 13, remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. Verse 15, these desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. So don't be misled, my dear brothers and sisters. Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. And finally, verse 18 says, he chose to give birth to us by giving us his true word, and we, out of all creation, became his prized possession. Now, I would like to rest on that a little bit, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go into Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8, and then we'll go from there. Verse 1, there is an appointed time for everything. And I'm going to pause there. Remember, if you're a fan of the Byrds, this verse is going to sound a little familiar of their famous song, Turn. But let's read the actual words of the Bible. I believe this is NASB 95. There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven, a time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to shun embracing, a time to search and a time to give up as lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear apart and a time to sew together. I found that really interesting. A time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. I'm going to stop there, go to verse 14 of the same chapter, and read 14 and 15. And I know that whatever God does is final. Nothing can be added to it or taken from it. God's purpose is that people should fear him. What is happening now has happened before, and what will happen in the future has happened before. Because God makes the same things happen over and over again. So with that, I want to get your guys' input here. I also have the Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of seasons. But before we even dive into that, I want to get what your guys' thoughts are after hearing those verses, what they have to do with seasons, maybe what it means to you or what it means biblically, just whatever comes to your mind. What do you guys think?
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there, yeah.
That was a long, but it all has a pretty overlapping theme, like you're talking about the different seasons and stuff like that, and how, you got spring, fall, winter, it's like, and nice thing about seasons is you're not stuck in a season for your whole life. So it's kind of the initial thing from that is like remembering, this too is temporary.
Sometimes it feels like you're stuck in it, but
yeah, some seasons are a lot longer. It's like it should be spring already, but we're still in winter.
Or we're stuck in summer for the longest time, and when's fall coming around? Why is it 80 degrees in October?
Yeah, exactly. Or 80 degrees in July.
Or 80 degrees in July. Oh, yeah, there you go. What's going on here? So, seasons, I like what you said. There's an eventual end to them. And at least in my experience, I mean, I'm a young whippersnapper. I'm only 27. And from what I've learned, I haven't gone through seasons where they last a decade or something like that.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe one day. Who knows? I don't know. But I don't know. What are your guys' experience with seasons? What do they mean in the sense of your own life and how you've experienced life so far?
Part of it too is I think from my was experience now is that learning to appreciate the season you're in and kind of not try to be looking forward to the spring or whatever when you're in winter and stuff, and learning what it is in this season that I'm called to do. What am I supposed to be doing in this season? Not like, if we associate it with ag stuff, it's like in the spring and stuff like that, you need to be planting, you need to be getting the field ready and all that stuff. If you're not doing that in the right season when it's the time, that because you're looking forward to the summer, you're like, I want the summer and go swimming and all that, it's like then you're gonna be starving in the winter and stuff. So it's like, and so there's definitely a time of recognizing the season you're in, and again looking hopefully towards the new season, but being active in the current season that you're in. And seeing what am I supposed to be doing in this season to prepare for the future.
David.
Let's see. So seasons. I think what I've learned in my life is kind of along the lines of what Nick was saying. It's learning to find joy in where you're at. Because it can be easy to get into the perspective of always waiting for something else, always wishing for something else, always hoping for something else, which can suck the joy out of your life real fast. And, life is hard. It's not like, it doesn't matter, like, it seems like no matter where you are, what circumstances you're born into, like life's going to throw some suffering at your way, and it can be easy to get focused on wishing and hoping for whatever trials or suffering you might be going through in your current season, and just making your focus on, oh man, I hope this ends soon. I hope I can move on from this soon. And eventually you get tired of wishing and waiting, and it starts to drain you. So what is really important is that I've found is learning to find joy in, sometimes it's even just little things, and thanking God for those things, shifting your perspective away from the things that you wish might be happening or the things that you wish weren't happening.
Yeah, I relate a lot with that specifically, especially in the little things, because there's been times, especially in whether it be I'm going through hardships or it's a really hot day or hard day or whatever that I'm going through, there's definitely times where you look at things and all you can see are the negative or the bad things that are around you or how you feel. Your feelings have everything, I would say, to do with it in terms of the negativity aspect, or even how you're thinking. But shifting that thinking and shifting into what I would say a state of grace is what I would point it to, really does change a lot and makes you appreciate the little things that God has done. Like, I was out delivering packages the other day and it was hot. It was like 100 degrees in Chico. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I'm like, well, I know it's going to make it. I know I'm going to make it, but I'm just exaggerating. Right. But then like little butterfly flies down. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cute. And you look up at the sky and yeah, it's hot, but it's a beautiful day. It looks real pretty. Just little things like that. But also like, when you shift your perspective that way, it also makes you reflective on your life. Like, hey, even though I'm delivering packages, I have a job, right? I'm delivering these. Hey, you working at night, David, and it's hot and it's sweaty and it, smells bad or whatever, and you're counting the cash or whatever. It's really not the best place to be, but there's always something you can be appreciative of in there. And I remember there was one time on the fires, I was driving our night guy back, and he was always Mr. Negative and a prima donna. Let me just say, oh my God, what a man to deal with. I love him. God bless him. However, man, he complained all the time. And there was a time where I had to check myself because my boss was saying, you cannot let him get in your ear because I can tell when it gets there. And I was like, whoa, okay. What do you mean? And then so he explained to me like, hey, yesterday you did really good, but now today something's off, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And there was like stuff I was struggling with and everything and during the fire, and it's not an easy thing to go through, but certain days I made it harder on myself in certain ways. And I could tell when I tripped up in whatever and sin or what have you. And yeah, those made those days harder, a lot harder. And a lot more made me more susceptible to the world ways, especially when people are being negative or their attitude, or you pick up on their attitude or their spirit, whatever. It's really, it's really, really scary sometimes in that sense. Not scary, but what's the word I'm looking for? It makes you, realizing the susceptibility makes you vulnerable to the waves that come crashing at you, I would say. So, but there's a point in Ecclesiastics here that says, in those verse 15, it says, and I'm just going to skip right to it. It says, because God makes the same things happen over and over again. And I saw that. I'm like, that's really weird. Now, I made sure it was like somewhat accurate translation, NSB 95. Got to go for it. Why not? But that, I want to know what you guys think that means, because the full verse says, what is happening now has happened before, and what will happen in the future has happened before, because God makes the same things happen over and over. I correlate this to when bad things happen and when trials come our way. Everybody goes through similar stuff in that sense. We all go through the fire. We all go through crappy things in our lives. And that's kind of how I've transcribed that. But what do you guys take away from that? I feel like, David, you look like you're thinking. You look like you're literally chewing on the word right there. You know? But I don't know. What do you guys think? Ecclesiastics is very out there, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. But it's got very profound stuff like this. But it's just kind of hard because in the Old Testament perspective, it can be hard from a lot of believers to apply it to today. But what do you guys think in the sense of how to apply it to today?
Well, one thing to know about Ecclesiastes is Ecclesiastes falls into wisdom literature, and biblical wisdom literature is very, like, it isn't as cut and dry as a lot of people sometimes think it is. Like, when we think of wisdom literature, we usually think of Proverbs, and it's like, oh, it's a bunch of wise sayings. But then if you actually read through Proverbs, like, a lot of it sounds very strange. And so you gotta, for one, you gotta be careful just about zeroing in on a particular passage. I usually try to, I mean, this is true of trying to interpret any biblical text, but especially in Ecclesiastes and Job, I feel the two less cut and dry wisdom books of the Bible. I really try to make sure I'm always interpreting passages from those books in light of the overall context that the book is happening in, and the overall, like, try to figure out what in general is the subject that is being talked about here, and make sure that whatever insights I might derive from specific passages are rooted firmly in that context. And so that particular part of Ecclesiastes is kind of talking about, not about necessarily the things that happen to us, but just how life is seemingly meaningless.
Yeah.
Like, we're born, we do the grind and then we die and we're gone. Kind of that's kind of the overarching thought that this section of the book has. So like when it's talking about what has happened will happen again, God causing the same things to happen over and over again, he's kind of almost dipping into a little bit of pessimism here, but it's for a specific purpose. He's sort of dipping into pessimism so that he can contrast the apparent meaninglessness of life with the joy that comes from following God.
Yeah, it's kind of along those lines of you have to have the bad and the good, or to appreciate the good, you got to have the bad. And so sometimes pointing out the extreme of the bad. But I think also, yeah, like kind of you were talking about, Jake, though, it is kind of talking about how we have, there's nothing new under the sun, you know, that's kind of where that comes in Ecclesiastes, you know, it's like, and that people, for the most part, we haven't changed in all the years since we've been created or whatever. And so the same things affect us. We just have more technology, more stuff like that, which kind of hides it or puts it in a different light. But the things that we always struggle with are still the same things, which is why a lot of the Old Testament actually still does apply as far as the principles of it. Which is one of the things, too, like Dave was talking about, when you're learning through the different parts of the Bible and learning about what happens in that area when that book was written and stuff like that, and gleaning from it. Was this a principle that was for that time, or is this a principle that passes all time? Like kind of that thing where he's talking about there is where it's that there's nothing new under the sun, you know, everything keeps happening over and over and over again, is that also can give you a reassurance that, you know, you're not alone in the world. You know, it's like, this isn't something brand new that's happened. I mean, even though, again, it's a little different now, you got an iPhone or something like that, you know, somebody writes you a mean tweet versus, you know, they say it to your face. You know, it's like, it's still an insult that hurts you physically or whatever. So the principle of it is still the same, and it still affects us in that regard. So that's kind of why I read it a little bit more too.
Yeah, it's interesting how, at least in the digital age that we are in right now, it's very special compared to, I would say, or significant, I guess is the word to use, compared to the rest of, I don't know, modern history, I guess, and how technology has advanced and how the communication method has changed as well. Because I was just thinking about this the other day, like, you know what, I was thinking about this the other day, I was like, you know what, speaking of seasons, not everybody's meant to hang out with everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Becomes really, really overbearing, and just everything's for a season, you know? Like, you can't hang out with every single person in your life you've ever met all at the same week, you know? Like, we're not meant for that. So there's an aspect of seasons where people will enter your life, but then they will exit.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I think, especially if you're paying attention, I feel like God is somewhat the master behind that, whether it be somebody praying or you praying or they pray during that time in your life, because maybe you don't need to be with that person, or better yet, that person is kind of moving past you, you know, or they need other people to be around. Yeah.
Because if you're around the same people for your whole life, then you don't grow, they don't grow. So because you're not encouraging it, you know, I mean, you're encouraging, uplifting, but you can't kind of stuck in a loop, you know. It's like because you both can only grow so far together, and so that's how I interpret it a little bit more. Is like, so you kind of move on again, not bad,
not like badly,
not bad, but it's like there's times because like me personally, I know a few people who have like friends who've had lifelong friends. Or like, I have like a couple, but it's like for the most part, like you said, I have seasons where, you know, like I was in the military, I had military friends, you know, and then when I got out of the military, we kind of went our separate ways or whatever like that. Then you get kind of school friends. Nicole was in school, so we had all of our teacher friends like that. And then as we got out of the teaching thing, we kind of that separated a little bit, and so, you know, and it changes. I think it is more so for our growth as well as the growth of others. Because again, I feel like if we were just with the same people for prolonged periods of time, then we can get really stuck and not grow. So
yeah, there's also the thing of like, oh man, that person's really cool, or man, I loved hanging out with that person. Like, they're just cool folks or good people, and I want to be around them. Yeah, but for some reason, it's just happenstance. They're not in your life anymore, or they move on, or just they get married or whatever, they move away or whatever, you know. There was a point back in late 2019 where both of my best friends growing up, both moved away, literally in the same like span of 4 months.
Yeah.
At the end of 2019, they moved away, and we grew up with them our whole life, basically. And they were like our only best friends. Me and Lexi's like best friends. And after that, I met one of them just by, I think it was a couple years ago, I was helping Angie move back to California, and he lives in Idaho now. And so I went to go visit him. And we had dinner, said, you know, gave a hug. We had dinner. We were at his mom's place. And then like, sure enough, we started talking. And then like, you know, Angie and his mom started talking. And then I sat next to him like, so what do you think about you still playing Nier Automata? Like, how you doing? You know, like, you in Persona, bro? Like, what's going on? And we just picked up kind of where we left off in that sense of video games or whatever, or what our likes are. But after that, it was like, oh, it was really nice to catch up. And then like, you know, he admitted, I'm not a great texter. I don't reply to text at all. I'm just not good at communication. I was like, that's okay. No problem. So we haven't basically talked since then. But it was interesting to visit back in his life. And I could always tell, like, you know what, Lord, I could be a good influence here and really speak to this person, or they could speak to me, or whatever the situation is. But I think there's a time and place for everything, and a time and place for them to be in your life and them to be out of your life. Either for them to learn or you to learn or what have you.
I had that too, where sometimes your relationship has to morph or change, because like there's been times in our lives where there's certain people who we really pour a lot into, like we spend almost, you know, all the time with them and all that stuff, and then later on it gets to the point where you can't be pouring all your time into that person anymore. Now they kind of got to stand on their own feet, you know, figure it out. And so for that season, it's like you're still encouraging them and uplifting them, but again, we're not spending as much time physically with them. And that's just from ministry. We've learned kind of is one of those things that to get, because again, we don't want people to be reliant on us. Again, we're not the savior. It's like Jesus is the savior. So again, the whole point is to connect them with Christ, so that way you build a relationship on Christ.
I think one way you can look at it is Paul didn't stay at the same church every week. He went to a different church for a set period of time, and as long as he needed to, and then moved on. And it's kind of like what Jesus commanded the disciples to do is, you know, shake the dust off your feet and keep going. At least I believe that's what he was saying when he meant that.
Well, that was for towns that didn't accept it.
Oh, didn't accept. Okay, sorry.
But he demonstrated he was on the move all the time. Jesus was, you know. It's like
sometimes he had to write them 2 letters. Other than that, there was never a third, as far as we know. You know, never a third letter, never a third Corinthians.
But then he showed up. He's like, all right.
Paul is very much like Valve. They just can't count to 3.
He's Gabe Newell, you know. I just want that comic. It's Gabe Newell walking along Paul, like it's the rapture happens or whatever, and Gabe Newell and Paul are in heaven, and Paul's like, "You got your new name yet?" He's like, "I did," and he's like, "You know what? Is it the same?" He's like, "Yeah, why? Because we both can't count to 3 or something like that, you know. Whatever." Workshopping right on the podcast, but anyway, I think that'd be a funny comic to do. It's super inside baseball, but it'd be great. Oh God, where do I want to go with this?
David, have anything on that?
Yeah, David, did you have anything on
friendships
or moving on or?
I guess I just I always like, you know, people are in your life for a season, but sometimes too it's like people I feel like sometimes people use the season, like, oh, it's just this, that's the season we're in kind of a thing as an excuse for like when problems arises in relationships.
Sure. That is one way out.
And they're like, you know, it's like basically there's hard work to be done to fix this issue. And sometimes it's easier just to say, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to move on from that and not think about it again.
Fair.
So that's the thing that came to my mind while you guys were talking about that. But other than that, I agree with basically everything you guys were saying.
A really funny point is Every time I open a new tab in Brave, I have a set picture or a random picture from a set of pictures to appear. And this was the picture that popped up when I opened a new tab. It was Portal 2. And so it was perfect timing, you know?
Nice.
Oh, so let's see. One other thing that happened, I guess I would mention is, speaking of bad things that kind of go their excuse, you know, hey, you know, this is just the season's ended, you know. But me and Lexi kind of had that experience with that other friend I mentioned. I won't say their name, but basically there's a situation where they moved away. We didn't communicate with them for a very long time. You guys know who I'm talking about, but I won't say the name on the podcast here. But they moved away. They messaged Lexi and asked, hey, I'm going to do something legally with something that's involving myself and somebody else. Do you have any information on this person? And basically, long story short, Lexi said, no, I feel uncomfortable. I'm not going to do this. And decided to not give any information. She didn't know anything about the situation, honestly, like all that kind of thing. So, and she said, I'm just uncomfortable with this. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And because of that, that friend kind of cut her off. And me, I guess, as well. I don't know. Never messaged me after that. But it was a very sad situation because that was the person we grew up with. We would always hang out, have a good time. And it was just really sad that whether it be ego or whatever situation that person's going through, decided in that moment, okay, you're no longer my friends, and cut us off. And with that, it was kind of like the finalization of that from what I've seen. And I've had other experiences with this with family and relatives and stuff, but it's more like, I don't know. I don't know how to, sometimes you can equate it to like egos. Sometimes you can equate it to whatever. But I feel like maybe there's certain things that the Lord does show you to say, hey, this is kind of the way I want it for you, and for you to go to the next step. And preferably the next step with me is what I think he would say. So I don't know. It's just, sad things like that happen, and hearts are hurt and people move on. But some people also don't let go, which is super unhealthy, Yeah,
it's finding that balance, like, kind of give a say, is like, is this a situation where I'm actually supposed to push through, or is this a situation where it's time to move on? One relationship that my wife and I ended up having with somebody was one we had built I'll say unhealthy relationship with somebody. They kind of in some ways idolize them. And so in the separating of that relationship, it made us put God back in first place versus idolizing the person who we were with or whatever, who was a friend of ours. And so realizing we had to step back and reevaluate, but put the friendship back in a more of a place where, refocus. So that way we're not idolizing this person or whatever before God, putting him before God or that type of thing. So that's something that we learned kind of the hard way through a couple of relationships. But it's like, so yeah, and that's the thing, is like nothing is really like black and white per se. A lot of stuff is kind of grayish in that regard. And it's, again, having the relationship with God to have those conversations to where like, God, is this a time where I'm supposed to push through, or is this a time where I am supposed to move on? Is this a closed door, or is this just a stuck door?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why I really appreciate the time like I've been involved in youth group, like as a youth leader specifically, like you learn, and also working at the college, you learn really quick. You learn very well that, oh, this is the end of the semester, this is goodbye. It's kind of like a timing thing, but like, people just move on. Like you're a stepping stone or part of their life for that period of time. And then there's the next stepping stone. Yeah. And not just for them, but for you too. Like it's like, I remember there's been so many kids that I've seen in youth group where I'm like, man, you're a good kid. Hope your future goes well. And then I never hear from them again. Yeah. Or, you know what? I think you got a lot to improve upon, but I'm praying for you. And then I never see them again, but like, in terms of the digital age, it's weird because with the easy access of communication,
you stalk them.
Not that. No, I don't do that. But you're friends with them on Facebook. Yeah. You have their phone number or whatever, and maybe you see them or you see them at a store or something. Like that period, that moment it just happens, and it's very odd. Like it's out of season for that person and you. But it's a glimpse, kind of like me visiting that friend in Idaho, But I don't know. Let's see. Where do we want to go from here in the sense of seasons? I guess I'll read the definition here. The normal definition that it says, but this isn't the first definition it gives. This is the one we're used to. It says here, a period of the year characterized by or associated with a particular activity or phenomenon. I would equate that to weather, is my guess. But the first definitions they give are these three specifically. It says a time, and this is Merriam-Webster, by the way. It says here, a time characterized by a particular circumstance or feature, a suitable or natural time or occasion, and then an indefinite period of time.
Mm-hmm.
I find that really interesting, but in terms of biblically speaking, it kind of speaks, I think, to biblically speaking in that sense. Like, for example, the Israelites were in Babylon for quite a while, but then it was over. They were in captivity with, they were slaves in Egypt for, I don't know how many generations, but a generation or two or whatever. And then they moved on. Yeah. Or it was time. Like the VeggieTales song. It's time. It's time. Did you just say it's time? And same thing in the desert, But sometimes God, it's such a perfect analogy for our lives where sometimes we are made to walk in the desert for that season, to learn or take away or let the old man die specifically. I think we talked about that Sunday. Sometimes you got to let that old man die, and that's why you're going through that. And when it doesn't happen in that season, it's going to lead into the next season, and God's still going to have you figure that out. And I don't know, I've always struggled with that because I'm like, oh, I thought I figured it out last time. What's going on? Come on, Father. And I was like, all right, well, if I really truly examine my heart, I know what's wrong. I know what I got to work on, that kind of thing. So it's it's just interesting to see those definitions, look at biblical definitions. You see the way life goes. But in terms of application of your life with that season, may I ask what season you guys are in now? David and Nick, and I was going to go into this bit, I guess, but before we do that, I don't know what season. Also, I've always been confused, and maybe you can help me out with this, both of you. How many different kinds of seasons are there? Because I've been told there's a building, a growing, a waiting, and then something else. But I don't know,
it's like generations. It's all made up BS. No, I'm kidding.
Gen Z.
I mean, it's just, when people talking about building or planting or whatever, waiting or whatever other kind of season, it's just something that they.
Oh, I think I'm in a growing season right now.
It's not like. I'm not trying to talk down on the concept, but it's not necessarily.
It could also be used as an excuse.
It's not like a hard. It's not like a. There's no hard science to, the seasons of life. Life is way more complicated than that.
Yeah, and way more nuanced. It's and sometimes what I've experienced, sometimes seasons overlap. You're like, oh, I know I'm almost done with this, but there are signs and little bits of pieces that are building to something else. Kind of like in a really good book you're reading or a really good story. There are pieces and elements that are setting themselves up to maybe in the future something else happening, But I don't know. What do you have to say about this, Nikki?
There's kind of a general thing. I was just looking it up. I think it's the second. It's in Timothy 2, 3-13. Because again, here specifically, everybody always kind of uses the ag reference, so you got, the farmer. So, you got, are we planting? Are we harvesting? No, what are we doing here?
Are you doing first or second, by the way?
I believe it's second.
Second Timothy 2. Second. It's 2 with an ST. Surst. I erased the 1 and I put a 2 and then it was ST first, but it's 2. Twoost.
Oh, yeah, let me see here.
This is great, by the way, stalling that I'm doing.
I just realized that. I appreciate
Incredible stuff.
Incredible stuff.
But I heard one pastor, actually one of the regional guys that you talked about, was again kind of with the whole thing with recognizing what season you're in. It's also kind of recognizing what type of ministry where you're in. And so we always associate most things with ag because again, here we're kind of a slow moving place. But there's also athletic. So you're an athlete. So are you in a season of training? And then, or are you actually at the season of performing? And then there's also soldier. Those are the ones I believe from that passage, 2 Timothy 2:13, 3 through 13, and it talks about how there is different seasons, but like David said, it's all metaphor for the most part. But it's like recognizing, is this a season for you to be building up, or is this a season for you to be actually doing stuff? Are you supposed to be out there harvesting, or is this the time when you're running your race? And with the example of the 3 different types, it's like farmer's kind of a slower thing. You have all this thing, and then harvest happens, and that's the really busy season. If you're an athlete, you're training all the time, and then when you have you're training for like one specific event, and then boom, you do it. Like when we do like any of the big,
like a VBS.
Yeah, VBS or like a taco feed or any other type of thing. That's kind of much more of like a athletic ministry type thing, because you're prepping all the stuff ahead of time, and then today's go day. It's go day. We're going all in. Everything's all in for it. And then you got kind of the soldier training, which again is a little bit more of a rounded. I feel in some ways soldier training is a little bit more kind of like farm training actually in some ways, because you have to be it's more of a well-rounded type thing. It's kind of like a gradual ka-thunk, 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 moving forward, and then you hit a big battle and boom. It's like, and so again, ultimately it's kind of BS-ish, like David was saying, but it's just different metaphors for the same thing, and it's recognizing what type of thing you're working.
Yeah, well, especially like I would equate it to sports too. Like you see the phrase, if you're into sports, like, oh, we had some veterans leave the team. We got to bring in some fresh blood. We have 1 or 2 guys. They're going to help lead. So we're in a rebuilding phase. Yeah. We're going to rebuild.
We're not going to playoffs this year. Yeah. We're just prepping y'all. We're not going to playoffs this year.
If you all on listening to this podcast haven't seen The Last Dance on Netflix, the documentary about the Bulls and the Michael Jordan era, fantastic documentary. It's like my most favorite documentary of all times. Like, I love me some Ken Burns. But this stuff is like the ish, bro. Like, it's so good. But they talk about that, like, at the very end, like, yeah, when Scotty and Rodman and Jordan leave, we have to completely rebuild. Like, we'll have some of the other
entirely
folks
different team.
Here. Yeah, it's entirely different team. And these guys have been here for a decade plus, And it's like, how do you, or even a church, like there's a rebuilding phase for a lot of aspects. And I just find it interesting. Like, even in sports, it's equated to rebuilding, Yeah. So, and in some cases, some assembly required.
David, got stuff on that as far as?
No,
it's just different. Different definitions.
Yeah, I mean the value of any of these metaphors is entirely dependent on the meaning you can draw from it. Yeah. Usually season, like defining seasons in terms of agriculture can be helpful if you're trying to like think about it from a biblical perspective, because a lot of stuff in the Bible goes back to agriculture simply because the Hebrews were a primitive agrarian society. Yeah. And the Hebrew language is very, very simple. Every word in the language goes back to some concrete thing. It's not like English where you have a word like love. It's just a concept. It's not really rooted in anything. You say it and people could generally more or less have an idea of what you're talking about. But it's not really rooted in anything. Whereas, like, the way the biblical Hebrew works is everything goes back to some concrete thing. So, in that sense, sometimes it can be helpful to think about what season you're in kind of an agricultural mindset. If you're trying to like apply biblical principles to, how you should live, or, what kind of thing you're doing, that can be helpful. But ultimately, it's, there's no hard and fast rules for it, I think. Yeah. You gotta be you gotta follow the leading of the Lord. You gotta be connected to Him, and you gotta be in the Word, and you gotta be praying. And you got to be attentive to the voice of the Holy Spirit when he takes you into a new season.
Amen. Yeah, I wanted to actually speak on what you said is being led. or being led by the Holy Spirit in that season, because I've made the mistake of finding or having signs happen, or what I think are signs from the Lord, and then pursuing that with all my capability.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've spoken about it publicly before, I think even at youth group. Yes, at youth group. And I mentioned like a story of like, oh yeah, when I met this girl, you know, and the story about, you know, meeting this chick and then meeting her again a second time and then a third time, what seemingly seemed by chance.
Yeah.
And it sure seemed that way. But I thought, oh, this might be like the one, you know, or whatever. And then like we exchanged numbers after that third meeting. And I'm like, yeah, this is like, why else would I meet this person by chance 3 different times? And it was funny because one was at work. The second one was at just your son's graduation at Core Butte. She was sitting right in front of us. And then the third one was at Hooker Oak Park in Chico for a for guys' day at youth group. And it was just really, really random. And it was like, I took it as, oh, this is what this means, you know? And it was a good thing to go through in the sense of like, you know, the memes where it says like, oh man, he meets a girl and the guy in the background's like, yeah, about to do some great character development on this guy, break his heart or what have you, you know?
Yeah.
And that's basically what happened to me. Was my heart was broken. She said she was seeing somebody or whatever after messaging back and forth for like 3 weeks. And basically, and she was young, like she's like, I was like, I think 24 and she was like 20 or whatever. So there was an age difference and, you know, that kind of thing.
4 years isn't that bad though.
Well, it's like,
yeah,
it was like, there's a difference. Like you could tell like maybe she sent the wrong communication or whatever, or I took it the wrong way, that kind of thing. So there's confusion.
Yeah.
You know, but sometimes those signs are they look really clear, at least to you. But that's why it's so important to be led by the Spirit, because if you see those signs, like say AI takes over the world and you're like, it's the end, guys. It's actually going to happen this time. It's like, no, let's be led by the Lord. Nobody knows the date or time, that kind of thing.
Put on the sunglasses and it says obey.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You get a black trench coat and Nick comes to our door and he's like, how you doing? It's like, oh no, here's the purple pill. Anyway, but you got to be careful. You really have to. And that was an important lesson for me to go through, because it made me invest more in God. And it made me realize, oh, I need to take this more seriously in that sense. It was also a really tough season because there's a 3-year span I'm going to go into here in this little story that I wrote up where I was just kind of on the grind, like the grind. And I'm glad you brought that up at the beginning, like the grind mindset in quotes, and what like the influencers out there kind of like say, yeah, you got to wake up at 4 a.m. You got to get this done. You got to get all your work done. You know, I go to sleep at 12 p.m. and then I wake up at 3 and I have another day. I get 3 days in one, you know, that kind of crazy stuff. But that has been, at least in my experience, like it can be super helpful, but in moderation, because if you go all in on that, it's not going to be rewarding at all. Even if, I mean, here's the thing. It can be rewarding, but God calls us to rest specifically. And that's kind of what I want to go to next. Like where in the Bible does it say, besides obviously in the very beginning, to rest and to take time with the Lord and to not constantly work, because we all need to rest at some point, and we all are called to rest, I believe. But where specifically in the Bible does it say that?
Well, that actually goes back to the beginning. Okay. God created the world, and in 6 days, people talk about the seven-day creation, but it's actually he created the world in 6 days, and then on the 7th day he rested.
Yeah.
So it's important because God is God. God doesn't get tired. So why did he rest? And once you start looking into that, you realize that, oh, rest is actually a very important concept. And then what happens when the Mosaic covenant is established? One of the laws is keep the Sabbath day holy. And what is the Sabbath? The Sabbath is on the 7th day, you do no work, you rest. And it was a very, very serious thing when Moses finally brought the 10 Commandments down, that afterwards, not the first time when he smashed them because they were worshiping the golden calf, but after he went up and got some new 10 Commandments and brought them back down again, there was an incident of a man gathering wood on the Sabbath day, and basically Moses is like, God, what do we do with this guy? And well, God's prescription for that guy was death by stoning.
Dang.
So the first Sabbath breaker on record was pretty much immediately after it was instituted, and it was punished with instant death.
And his name was Kevin.
So, not to, it's kind of a downer, but it also underscores the importance of when God says to rest, you take it seriously.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the example of Jesus, who, despite all the traveling and all the ministry that he did, it's very clearly recorded in all the Gospels how he intentionally took time out of his schedule to be away from everybody else and spend time in prayer with the Father. And then, of course, you have in Hebrews, where it talks about there remaining a rest for the people of God. And today, while you hear his voice, don't, you better labor. It specifically uses the word labor to enter the rest, because you don't want to end up like the Israelites in the wilderness who disobeyed God and missed out on entering his rest as a result.
Yeah, I think one of the important things too is Sabbath. Again, it ultimately goes back to the beginning, and God setting the example again, just like Jesus set the example. Was if God took a day to rest, I mean, how important is that for us? But I think also part of it is for us to recognize that we're not all that. I think it's a humbling thing as well, because we get in the grind, and we're like, this ministry is going, it's going. It's like, I have to keep it going, It's like, and so if you take a day off, like what's gonna happen to all this other stuff around me? Is the world gonna keep spinning? And you take a day off, you're like, you know what? The world keeps spinning even without me. And so I think it's humbling in that regard. So we don't get too prideful of ourselves in it. So I think that's part of it, but.
Yeah, most definitely. I was going to bring up actually the part where Jesus was where he calms the storm. Yep. Before that, he was sleeping. Yeah, he was taking a nap. And I actually have a shirt that somebody got for me that says, "You know what? Jesus took naps, and so do I. So I'm going to be like Jesus." But
a side note, I saw on the internet, it was like, I can't remember. It was some people were making fun of a post by some the more cringy, extreme segment of the Messianic folks, talking about dietary laws and all that. And people were making fun of that. And someone's response was, he who is weak eats only vegetables. The Bible somewhere. Which is true. That is a quote from the Bible. It's completely snipped out of context, but yet those words appear in the Bible.
Only vegetables, huh?
He who is weak eats only vegetables. So I thought that was really funny.
Where is that in the Bible?
It's in Romans, I believe.
Romans?
It's talking. The context is talking about the context is about eating meat that could have been sacrificed to idols, because you have believers who are living in Rome who are of Jewish descent, so they still follow the Jewish dietary laws. They still try to live as Jews, even though they believe in Jesus, because that's just what they know. And so one of the sort of things that they run into is buying meat from pagan markets.
Oh.
And the idea that this pagan meat, this meat from this market could have been used in some sort of idol sacrifice, you know, because the thing is, like what Nick was talking about earlier when we were going over Ecclesiastes, humans are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
We haven't changed. It's like we have barbecues, and the ancient peoples had barbecues too. The difference was their barbecues involved religious sacrifice to some kind of pagan deity. And so the problem for Jewish believers in a pagan city like Rome is that if I want to eat meat, I might have no choice but to buy this meat that was the animal that it came from was sacrificed in some kind of religious rite to some pagan deity. And so Paul puts it in the perspective of, well, an idol isn't really anything. So as long as it's not, so if you can eat meat without it affecting your conscience, you're not going to go to hell for that. But some people's faith is just not in that place.
Yeah.
And it's for those people, Paul says it would be bad for them to try and eat meat, because then they're not trying to please God with their faith. Because it all comes back down to faith. So there's a section where it talks about one person eats meat and he who is weak eats only vegetables, talking about that controversy specifically. But yeah, some person in a post about, someone advocating kosher law for Christians and having a picture of like a hamburger as like an evil demon. So yeah, somebody posted like, yeah, he who is weak eats only vegetables. The Bible somewhere.
That goes right back to our Easter conversation we had not too long ago, I think, where it's, don't do something that will make your brother or sister stumble, I think is what it was. And we were like, well, you know what? I'm going to call it Resurrection Sunday. And it's like, well, okay, if you don't want to call it Easter, don't call it Easter. We know what it is, though, so I'm not going to put block your way in anything, or block your way in any way, Let's see. I'm going to read James 12 again real quick. It says, God blesses those who patiently endured testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. One of the things, and it ends there, one of the things I've realized that helps me, I've been struggling a lot with specifically using like language, specifically at work. Like after getting hired at this job, there's a lot of times where, you fall down and you hit somebody's bush, or you lose a package in the van or something like that. Or
I give him the old bleepity bleep bleep
you
bleep.
want to give it the old bleepity bleep, or the doors. The Ford vans are terrible because you'll park and it doesn't unlock the doors because it's a Ford. So I have to do an extra step unlock and then go to the back of the van. It's really annoying, and some don't. So it's like you hit or miss which one you'll get depending on the day. But it's really annoying. You're like, you go to open the van door, you're like, son of a. And you go and you unlock it, you're like, or like, I can't find this package, they didn't put it in here, whatever. But I've really struggled with like every time an expletive comes out, I've been really like hard on myself and saying, no, like, Father, forgive me. I'm sorry. Like, just let's keep going. And, I'm really bad. I'm sorry. That's basically what I would say. Like, Father, forgive me. I'm sorry. Moving on. Let's go. No, not, holy fudge. That's what I'm going to say, But, yeah, that's something I've been struggling with and something I've realized that's helped me a lot. It doesn't fully stop the expletives from coming out when it's like 100 degrees out, but sober-mindedness is one of the things I've really realized that helps. And just making sure your mind's not foggy with whatever you're struggling with. But I think one thing that stood out to me, Nick, when you were doing your sermon about that touched on this was the pray without ceasing, and then kind of just being, what was the term, splashed with scripture, or
the overflowing from
overflowing
to abundance.
Something like
from abundance. And so
from
abundance is overflowing in Greek. If you look up in Greek, it's actually means overflowing versus just having a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I guess would be abundance because you can't carry it all. It's like it's so much stuff that you can't carry. So you're dropping some all over.
Yeah, it's funny because like
That's from James 10:10.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then
John 10:10.
Yeah. And then I think it's Psalms 1. It says Psalms 1 and then 2 through 3. His delight is in the law of the Lord, firmly planted in streams of water.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was correlating with the same thing, but it kind of applies similarly. Like the closer you get to the water,
Mm-hmm.
the more chance you have of being filled with it.
And the thing too with the planting, it's intentional. Whereas like it wasn't just dropped. If you're planted, it means you intentionally chose this spot is where we're putting this tree.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I want to read, unless you have anything, David, but I do want to read this bit from a certain song, unless you have anything to say. No? Okay. So I wanted to read this the bridge from the song Seasons by Need to Breathe. This is a very special song. David's very aware of this. I'm sorry, David, but I'll read. I'm going to have to tell the audience. It's
David's top 5.
It's very much a song that got me through the season I'm going to go into here in a little bit. But this song like carried me through. And that whole album of Out of Body by Need to Breathe carried me through a certain portion of my life. It means very much a lot to me. But the words are really interesting in the bridge here. It says, in quotes, I was in perpetual anticipation, and I never knew what was worse. The evil eye had spent time reliving all the worrying that made it hurt. I am done with waiting on the creek to rise, 'cause there's more to life. Oh, there's more to life. There's more to life. So that kind of goes directly into what you were just mentioning, Nick, about intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like what I've would say, especially to some of the youth group kids, or whenever the discussion of seasons kind of gets brought up, is what are you doing in this season to glorify God? Or what you need to ask God, hey, Father, whatever I'm in right now, even if I don't know what it is, you know what it is, you know the full context. I might be revealed of it later, but whatever season I'm going through right now, what do you want me to take away from it? What do you want me to learn? What Bible verse or book of the Bible do you want me to rely on during this season? What is the purpose of this time, basically? And that is purposefully bringing intentionality and giving it to God and saying, Lord, like, you're the master commander of this. You have to submit to the Father and to this to get the most out of your life, is what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just something I've learned, and kind of sober-mindedness really does help you focus on that. It's really hard. It's not easy, but really submitting and being intentional about the season you're in is pretty much going to help you carry you through that whole season.
Yeah.
Because you're going to, have the Father be there with you, helping you along. I don't know. What do you guys think? Has there been a point where you've had to say, hey, Father, I give it to you, but specifically having to do with seasons?
I mean, I feel like
parts of your life.
I feel like that's everything, maybe when I was a lot younger, there were maybe I thought maybe there were times where, I thought I had to rely on God less or submit to him less or trust in him less. But I've gotten to the point where no matter what season I find myself in, I have to rely on God. I have to submit to him. I have to give it to him no matter what. There's just no way for me to there's no way for me to live out the life he's called me to live otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, because like each season kind of was different in regards of, kind of like Dave said, for me, I had the, kind of get out of my parents' house, and then join the military. And so each of the military, when you go into the military, they kind of tell you what to do, where to do it, all that stuff. But then you get out of the military, and so it was an intentional thing to leave the military. And then it's like, all right, now what type thing? And I left it kind of very broad. And then in the next season, after I got out of the military, the stuff I got into was you start having kids and stuff like that, which again, they get a little more obligated into things you got to take care of. You got to take care of the kids. You got to have a job, all that type of thing. But as each season went on, I started, limiting my fallback plans, because usually, typically, we always want like lots of fallback plans. And as I've gone through each season, I've come up with, kind of like Dave was talking about, it was like having less and less fallback plans, and all like this, just going all in, kind of like going all in with God. And that's what each season for me has got to the point where now, also, it's kind of different with like pastoring ministry like that. Nicole and I talk about this quite a bit, is that when you're doing ministry, especially like a pastoring like that, you can't do kind of the two-faced chameleon thing or whatever, where like at work I'm this person, at home I'm this person. Because in ministry, especially like pastors like that, it all overlaps so much. So you kind of had to break that down to, I mean, luckily for me, for the most part, I usually was the same person everywhere I was. I mean, obviously you get a little bit more of a work persona versus, home persona and stuff like that. But it definitely was a transition as far as like recognizing, because like for me, work in many ways was actually like an escape from real life, because like from 9 to 5, nothing else in the world matters except for my job and getting my job done. It's like in pastoring, that doesn't work. It's like, because it's like 24/7, you're out there, like no matter what, and things come up at different times and all that. So you kind of got to be ready for it, open for it. And so it was each season though, again, looking back, I see there's definitely times like when we, where we kept getting like less and less fallback plans. Is kind of the only way I can kind of describe it. That, to which getting got us to the season now where we're in, where we've for a while been just relying on God in all things, which again I think is the ultimate goal to get to. But for us, it kind of was, I would say forced, but we're intentional about it. In the kind of the last 2 to 3 seasons we were in, building up to that point, which again, looking back, I see that was the journey to get us to where we're at now.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting watching like some of the stuff you guys been through, especially like just thinking back in the last like 5 or 6 years or whatever. It's interesting to see, because I remember finances were a big thing at one point, like, and they still are, obviously.
Money's always an issue.
Money's always an issue, obviously. But I remember that big thing of you guys talking about that. I think it was, I learned that, I think it was starting 2023 where I left the store and I was like, oh crap, man, I'm struggling right now. I don't know what I'm going to do. And that whole basically season of, of my life at that point forward was, and it still is to some extent, is like, Father, I give it to you. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know you're going to provide. That's kind of like how I got the job at Amazon. Was like, I put in Sunday night, I threw in a bunch of applications. It was Father's Day. Threw in a bunch of applications. We were just hanging with the fam. I had my computer. So I put in a bunch of applications and finished my resume up. And then they were the only ones that got back to me. But that Sunday night, I tried to buy tickets for a movie. Completely ran out of my account. I had no money in my account. I was like, crap, what am I going to do? And it was a scary thing. But I'm like, at this point in my adult life, I've been at $0 before enough times where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be okay. I'm going to give it to the Father. And as long as I work hard and do my best and just pursue like doing the right thing and pay my bills on time and do what I can, I'm going to leave it in his hands, basically, So it's scary, but it was one thing my boss said to me one time at Butte. She said, "Yeah, something happened on the freeway and her tires blew up or whatever, and she had to call AAA and all this stuff." And she showed up to work way later, and she told me what happened, and she said, "Yeah, they're gonna cost like $1,000 total." And I was like, "Wow, that's a lot." But she's like, "But you know what? I'm gonna see that $1,000 again." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. Like it's a good way of looking at it because
money comes and goes.
It comes and goes, exactly." So.
Yeah, that was a big thing for us again. And each time that you're able to rely on God for that, because again, like you were talked about, I think at the beginning, was you mentioned, God shows up in the 11th hour at the 59th second. It's always like that last minute, and then eventually you get to the point where he's going to show up at that time, so you don't stress it as much.
Yeah,
it's still you still stress a little bit because you're like, oh, I'm still crossing my fingers hoping that happens. But then as you get to the point where you're able to rely on that, like he's shown up all these other times, why would I doubt it now?
Yeah.
It's like. And I think at those, when you finally have that piece kind of it, then God actually starts showing up earlier. So you don't, I don't know, for me anyways, or just you get confident in it, that knowing he's going to show up and take care of it. So then you don't worry about it as much. But
yeah. And it's funny, even though like, and it's funny, after I got hired, which I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing, I got hired. But like the next day, they text you and they said, hey, like, if you go into today for the drug test before this time, we're going to get it filed really quickly and it's going to be great. But I overslept that morning and I woke up at like 11, and that's when they said, as long as you get in before 12, you'll be fine. So I rush, I struggle. I'm like, I'm freaking out. And I go into town and I get to the drug testing facility, and sure enough, it's 12 o'clock and they're on lunch. And I'm like, gosh, dang it. So anyway, it was a thing that was a very stressful thing. I felt very defeated and bad about the situation because, I overslept. It was my fault. But I kept like thinking to myself, you know what? It's okay because, if God got me this job, then I think it's going to be all right. It's going to turn out okay. I just need to be obedient, and maybe not stay up so late, So, that's something I've learned. But all right, I think I'm going to dive into the story bit here, and then we're going to go from there, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
It's very long, just FYI, but here we go. All right, let's see. All right, for context, heads up, the audience. I'm a very introspective person, and I'm somebody who loves to analyze things in all aspects. Something that I've been learning recently is to not like overthink things.
So what he's saying is forgive him while he spurgs out for a little bit.
Exactly. Thank you, David. I couldn't have put it better. But I would say God gave us a brain for a reason, and to take things away that we need to learn. And obviously we have to use our reason for a reason. That's what I'll say. So here we go. There was a time in my early adulthood where lots of things happened at once. I lost my very last set of grandparents, passed away the same year. After that, 2020 hit and the craziness of that year hit. At the same time, I moved out of my parents' place. I had to learn how to live with people other than my family. I finally got hired as a permanent employee at my current job. I also started working at a restaurant. And also, it was only me and Steven leading the youth group at the time, which was very difficult, but we got through it. Around the same time, I was also making new friends and figuring out how to navigate new relationships, especially with new friends. All this happened within a span of like 6 months into the next 2 to 3 years. As that season ended, I realized I needed a break from things. I decided to make a call about sustainability in my life. There's a game design philosophy in the games industry called design by subtraction. This was coined by the legendary game designer Fumito Ueda, especially in his cult classic, Ico. It involves a method of reevaluating your design by taking away features, removing elements, and putting more focus on the core design, what is making the product special, distinct. It's more about removing the stuff that takes away from what you are trying to do to reach your full potential. So I decided to subtract. And things were on the run and completely out of control. So I made the call. I decided to step away from youth group for about a year. And I took a break from certain relationships out of my own sanity. As well as it just so happened that the cookie crumbled this way. I left my job at the restaurant I was working at. It was 3 years and 3 years working there. And it wasn't necessarily what I had planned, but in hindsight, it's exactly what God wanted for me and for me to get to the next phase/season in my life. It was back to some simpleness as well as less stress overall. It was a healing I had to go through. I was asking the Lord what he wanted me to do, and I learned, with time and effort, more about being intentional in my life about God's direction. The prior 2 to 3 years before that, January 2020 to January 2023, it's also weird how time works, but that's the dates that lined up there. But that was the part of my life where I was just going through the motions, the things that I and others set up that I was just playing a part of. True growth was happening, but mostly in character and endurance in my life. But spiritually, it was barren. I was emotionally reactive and numb, relationally shallow, mentally exhausted. It was a place where I was struggling every day. I was not surviving, or I was surviving, not thriving. And after January 2023, the real growth started. I learned through a friend of mine how to appreciate all the little things in life and to truly grow as a person. Treat things more seriously and find a new career in the meantime. I decided to go a path God presented to me, and in 6 months, I was ready to work on California wildfires, just in time for summer. And then another season started, where we didn't have work, or any work, for a whole year, June 2023 to June 2024. I was in debt, there was very little work, but the Lord wanted me, I believe the Lord, through that, the Lord taught me and made me realize now that it was a season of patience. That year of no work was a season of being patient and not worrying about what would happen next. I learned how to give it all to God, to give all things to Him at the same time when I was taking risks. There was also an aspect where I was involved in helping others in that current season. I helped my sister move back from Idaho that fall. My boss, Analia, had to go on maternity leave, and she was somebody that has helped me every step of my path there at Butte for the last 5 years. And so that was a big change, and I had to say goodbye. And also during this season, I worked with 2 wonderful coworkers who, age-wise, would have been in the youth group when I was helping lead. Those 2 guys, Kobe and Garrett, had myself made a good team. We worked well together, we got things done, and they were going through some massive struggles in their lives. They didn't rely on God, they were very worldly, but I later noticed afterward that I was supposed to be Jesus to them, especially. I wasn't perfect, but I did my best. They were good guys. And right as I was truly realizing this, it was all over. They graduated Butte, and we said our goodbyes, and life went on. The last bit I'll say here is this. That's something I really appreciate about working at Butte College and being a youth leader, is you learn how to say goodbye. You also learn a lot about seasons, and how everyone is in each other's life for a set period of time. I ain't talking about dying, although that could be an aspect, for sure. I'm talking about when to say goodbye. In this age of constant communication, we still have them in our friends list and phone number. But like life was before cell phones or before phones in general, you catch up when you can. You cannot be part of everyone's life at every point in your life. It's not practical. It's not a reality you want to entertain. But cherish them when they are in your lives, or when you see them at a store or gathering. God had them in your life for that specific reason at that specific time. Maybe you should ask God why they were there in the first place. Why were they there? You got to be intentional about it. Like with all seasons in life, you should ask these questions. What is your intention with me during this time? By asking this, you are being intentional about His purpose for your life in this season. Also ask, what is He doing? What is God doing? What does He want you to focus on? And of course, what verse does He want you to focus on as well? And that's all I got for you guys.
All right. So now that the video essay is over with, we can continue with our podcast.
All right. Well,
it's all right, though. I love a good video essay.
Just not while you're recording a podcast.
David
Oh, man.
There's
We don't
different
have a
ones.
format. It'll be a clip, I guess. I don't know, David. But was there ever a point in your guys' life specifically, it doesn't have to be a span of years or whatever, it could be a week, I don't know, where it was one of those really tough times, but defined you who you are as an adult specifically?
I mean, I don't know. It's, yeah, like, for me, it's less, like, it's less about like certain moments in my life and more about just like, just pushing forward, I guess. Just following the Lord, submitting to Him little by little, little by little. And I don't really notice progress I've made till I've made it way, way, way later. And by that point, it's like enough time has passed where I can no longer speak of like this moment in my life.
Yeah,
you
this
know?
moment, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
one of those things where I'm just a slow learner.
Yeah.
I'm just a slow learner. I don't get it until too much time has passed. So for me, it's less about specific moments in my life, and it's more just like as I've gotten older, I've just had to labor ever so much more to enter into his rest. Because as time passes, I become more and more aware of just how precious and how valuable that rest is.
Amen. Yeah. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, for me, I again didn't necessarily at the moment see the building blocks. I guess it kind of builds a foundation, I feel, because again, there's many different seasons, and some of those seasons kind of overlap. Because like I think there's definitely seasons as far as like age. So like when you first get out of high school or whatever, that's kind of a season of exploration, seeing what's going on, what you're doing, who you really are, versus now that you're out from underneath your parents' authority and stuff like that. And so that's the time where a lot of us figure out who we are, kind of our 20s or whatever. So that's a kind of a time of exploring, see who am I really, who am I going to become, all this stuff. And then as you get older, you go through kind of like 30s, you can kind of have an idea of who you are, or whatever. And then you get to 40s and you're like, oh, and then you start thinking about, as you get even older, you start thinking about your legacy. What am I leaving behind and all that? So there's definitely that kind of season, just kind of like Dave was talking about, just as you get older anyways. And you realize again, the importance of time, because as you have less time, you realize it's the one thing you can't get more of. I mean, another $1,000 will come around, but another minute ain't coming back. But I was like,
wow. You're just full of those, aren't you?
But it's like, so there's definitely those kind of seasons, which again, just kind of age-wise. And then there's the seasons of, like, again, I have kind of broke down to before I joined the military. I have a season of when I was in the military, which again was when I was younger too. So the military really was a time of finding myself, which again, because I was in my 20s, teens and 20s. And so it was really a time of finding out who I really am. I'm in the military, other influences out there in the world on me. And then I get out of the military, and then I'm in kind of the newly married stage, having kids and all that stuff. So that's another stage. And again, looking back, I see the building blocks that I built of the foundation of, again, who I am. And so it definitely adds to that. But again, in the moment, I don't like, kind of like Dave was saying, you don't really per se see it, but as you look back on it,
you don't see it as you go through it.
Yeah,
I would say.
And so I mean, and then each one of them, like I mentioned too, is like in each one of those two, partially, some people feel it's like as you get older too, is like your options get narrower and narrower as you get older, but because you don't have as long to build things or to do things. But also in some of that, again, it was me being much more intentional with the choices of following the path that God actually put me on, versus in my teens, I kind of was running from the path that God had put me on, because I want to make sure this is where God sent me to. And in some ways, it was me though, just I guess that's rebelling, or going.
I want to make sure I make the right choice.
Yeah, is this really where I want to lock myself into, type thing? And I had plenty of confirmation that it was, but I resisted for a long time doing that. I kind of did a Jonah thing, we'll go to the ends of the earth and see what and hide from it. But God finds you where you are, and even meets you where you're at, and through that, he brought me back to to what my ultimate calling is again, it's to pastoring and all that. So. But
he got there eventually.
He still uses again all those experiences and again the stuff that I did for that. But again, how much more could I have done for the kingdom if I had focused on actually what my calling was when I already kind of knew it, but I was resisting it. So
yeah.
But I mean, that's the wonderful thing about being human is like we screw up.
Yep.
We fall short of our potential all the time, and so. Yeah, that's one of those things that I've had to grapple with is like, sometimes I'm like, well, how much time have I squandered over my life, and how much potential have I wasted? And there comes a certain point where you just have to make your peace with that.
Yeah, you're not getting back, so.
It's just another thing that you have to give to the Lord and trust him with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, like it says in Romans 8, he works all things
Yes.
for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purposes. He works all things. So that's anytime I feel the temptation to think about my past mistakes and be like, man, all the stuff I could have done, and all the wrongs I could have righted, and it's like I just have to stand on that promise that he's going to work all that to good somehow.
Yeah, because that just using it as a reminder to do in the moment what you're supposed to be doing. But if you get focused on it, then it just makes it so you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing right now because you're reminiscing too much on the past of going, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. So you get focused on that versus, well, what are you supposed to be doing right now instead of remembering the the things that you could have done better or whatever, and again, learning from it. But again, not forgetting, but remembering it so that way you can learn from the future and not make that same mistake again.
Yeah, there's definitely let's see. I was gonna say something, but I needed to look up. That's his name. It's a little cheesy when you see those things on the internet where it's like, oh, this actor didn't get it big until he was 40 or 50, or the famous one, J.K. Rowling didn't write Harry Potter till she was in her 40s or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, those are pretty cheesy. But I saw one the other day that made me think about it, and it was Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime. He didn't get that gig until he was 42. And I was like, huh, interesting. But imagine if he imagine if he did other stuff in life that didn't lead to that, and we wouldn't have gotten Peter Cullen as the legendary Optimus Prime, and his character would die, and we wouldn't have Prime Day. I'm just saying, But it's when you put it in perspective like that, it makes you appreciate life, at least in my mind, because you're like, there's a lot of things that will define you that are going to lead to these moments that God has in store for you that you needed to build up to get to that moment. And also timing with the Lord is everything. Like, it is really, truly everything from what I've learned. Like, all the stuff I've regaled you with about all that crap that I like of my life, basically. I didn't realize all this until 2024 or whatever. Yeah. 4 years after it all started, or after I went through it. Like, I didn't realize all the context or the steps along the way until it was all over, and that's just part of it. And that's part of life, honestly. There's a couple other examples you could pull of different people and who are famous now who didn't start until later. But I think what's most important is remember that timing is everything with the Lord. And when you give it to him, it co-partners with him in your steps, in your walk, in your journey with him. And it's really beautiful because you have the creator of the universe, the guy that sent his son down to die for our sins. We have that same power in us. Yeah. It's really beautiful. So, yeah.
The other cheesy little meme things, the one I always like is God planned for your stupidity when he created you, So he works it all again for his good because he knew what you were going to do. So he knew you were going to run away in this part or whatever. So he calculated that into the matrix.
Yeah. Yeah. He knows us very well. He gave us, these feelings and that kind of thing, but the intelligent design is there.
Yeah.
But when he created us, he knows he knows how stupid we can be with two O's.
Two O's.
David's like, what? Stupid with two O's. We still need to watch that, David. That's from Knives Out.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to watch it together.
It's a classic.
It really is. It's a classic, man. But anyway, I'm gonna end with this. Speaking of cheesiness, I'm gonna end with this from an excerpt from the song "Times" by 10th Avenue North.
An excerpt?
A set of verses.
An excerpt?
Excerpt. Thank you. Is that the word?
That is the word.
An excerpt.
So wait, excerpt.
Excerpt is not a word.
It's not a word.
It's a script you no longer use.
Okay, what was it?
Excerpt.
Excerpt. All right, I'm gonna read this excerpt from this 10th Avenue North song, and then we'll probably end it after that. So, here we go. And so it says here, I hear you say, my love is over, it's underneath, it's inside, it's in between. The times you doubt me when you can't feel, the times that you question, is this for real? The times you're broken and that time that you mend, the times that you hate me and the times that you bend. Well, my love is over, it's underneath, it's inside, it's in between. These times you're healing and when your heart breaks, the times that you feel like you're falling from grace, the times you're hurting, the times that you heal, the times you go hungry and are tempted to steal, the times of confusion and chaos and pain. I'm there in your sorrow under the weight of your shame. I'm there through your heartache. I'm there in the storm. My love, I will keep you by my power alone. I don't care where you fall, where you have been. I will never forsake you. My love never ends. It never ends. And that's pretty much all I got for you guys. There's a lot more. I was looking at the notes from the sermons, Nick, and there's so much more, but I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah.
And yeah, praise God. Thank you, Nick, for being here, by the way, taking your time out of your valuable day of weed eating and enjoying the nice weather today. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys too.
Appreciate you, David, for being here and just being you. We love everything about you.
You don't have to sugarcoat it.
We didn't want you to be anyone else.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for listening to the Snarp Fangle Podcast and yet another week. We'll see you another time. And remember, when you're counting to 3, you can count by 25. And you can even call back to this episode of 75 of the Snarp Fangle Podcast. Don't forget to Snarp Fangle on.
Bye-bye now.
Thing, but maybe he's not. So he goes to his pastor friend for advice.
I didn't ask for this fight.
That's a fact, but here it is.
I think what's important is that Christians stop rolling over all the time. When is it our right to fight? Tired of being pushed around. I think it's time that Christians stand up for themselves.
People were drawn to Jesus because of his love. He was gentle with the meek and hard as a rock with the arrogant. And when he talked to the foolish, he was patient. Never became a fool himself.
And no offense, but maybe you'd understand a little better if you were the one being attacked.
Brother, who do you think you're talking to? I'm a black preacher in the deep south. I could build you a church with all the bricks been thrown through my windows.
Wow.